What is your overall take on the mental health landscape right now?
It's the best of times. It's the worst of times. It's how I take it right now, man. Let me start with the good. This right here, we're having this conversation. This is one of what, like, millions of conversations happening online about mental health right now, whether it's podcasts, social media, just random corners of the internet. People have the ability and the comfort and safety to talk about their mental health in a way that just didn't exist when I was a kid, didn't exist when I was in college, didn't exist when I was getting my PhD. These things were not there. And then also, uh, people who have, like, followings, whether they're influencers or to some degree politicians or celebrities, it's a bit more normal now to talk about the stuff that's going on for you. That, I think, is fantastic and gives me hope and has really moved the needle on a lot of different stuff. And we we haven't done much to build the infrastructure that makes mental health support more accessible, at a government level, at a healthcare level in the United States, in many different communities. We haven't built the structures that need to be in place, and that's not just an America problem. That's also a global problem. There's very few places in the world where I think people are like, yeah, mental health, we got this. We got a great way to address this in our country. And then the last thing, the good, bad, and ugly of this is we've built a lot of technology that I think is drifting us away from the way our minds work, and might be, not just might be, is definitely making our problems worse. And I'm deeply concerned about the direction we're going there. I think we're at a big crossroads here, man, and I think a lot is going to change, and I don't know what direction it's going to go in. I think some good stuff's going to happen. I think some worse stuff is going to happen.
Why do you think that social media and stuff is such a negative for people's mental health?
So it's there is some good with it. Like, I think if you're a well connected, doing okay person, you've got friends you like, you've got family you get along with, I think social media can be a wonderful place for you, where it's just extending the benefits you have in your in-person life out onto the internet. I think if you're doing okay, you got a good network, you probably are doing okay and have a good network online too. For everyone else, I think what social media can do is a lot of things that kind of hijack the way our minds work. So we're really wired for social connection. I think this is where, well, let me just back it up. We're really wired for connection. And I think this is where a lot of addiction problems become problems, is if we don't have enough connection in our lives, we will find it through substances, we'll find it through behaviors, we'll find it through things that really make rob us of the kind of person we want to be, right? So that's addictions. But I think we're wired for connection, and what social media does is it gives you this false sense of connection. Most social connections are a mix of things that drain from you and also things that revitalize you. Like when we started recording, it was awkward. I've never met you before. I don't know how this is going to go. Are we going to vibe? Is it going to be a good experience? But you kind of have to get over that awkwardness. And now where we're at is like, oh man, I'm really feeling this conversation. This is going to go well. I got a lot of things that I want to talk about. There's probably a lot of things you want to talk about. That's great. But what a lot of social media does is it takes and it takes and it takes. It doesn't give back. And it triggers performance and social comparison, and that's probably the worst part about social experiences. It triggers performance. You never really get the stuff that makes you feel supported and loved and cared for, and you have fun. Like it's very different to be playing a video game with your friends in person where you can see each other, you can talk to each other. It's different doing that versus playing online where you don't see each other. If you don't know if your buddy's having a hard day, if he hasn't showered in 7 days, right? And then that's even different than watching a video that your friend posted of them playing a video game, which is even different than watching a live stream of someone else playing, right? So the further and further we get from the ways in which we're built to interact, the less we're getting the good stuff that helps us. And then the last thing about it, Doug, we don't really control these feeds, and social media hasn't been social in a very long time. Like, what is this weird place we live in now where you can get like a baby picture from a friend, and then some type of the next thing you see is a horrific image of war somewhere in the world, and right after that is some form of AI generated propaganda. Like, it's really doing a mess on our mind to constantly be exposed to these different things. So I can go on and on and on about all the levers that tech companies can pull to manipulate our behavior and hijack our attention, but that's really what these things have become. They're not social playgrounds anymore. They're places to harvest our attention, to manipulate us, to sell us ads, and I'll say one more thing. Backing up from social media, the big problem with a lot of the tech that we've created, it's robbed us of friction. So now it's so easy to text me, DM me, contact me. It's so all that friction's gone. And so I'm getting like hundreds of messages from like people I don't even know. We're not built for that. It's so easy to just press a button and immediately get what you want, whether that is food delivered to your door, whether that is you want an intimate connection with someone you're attracted to. You can just press a button and you can become, you can follow them on OnlyFans, right? Or porn or whatever you want. It's immediately there. And porn and stuff like that is one thing, but it's also another thing where what I'm hearing from so many people is things don't really feel very meaningful anymore. Things feel empty. And if you don't have to put in any work to figure out what to watch on TV or to get something or make something, if it all comes immediately, it feels meaningless. And then suddenly you're like, well, what the hell am I even doing here? Life just feels like nothing. It feels numb. So, Doug, just a few simple problems for us to solve.
And you pulled on a lot of different levers there with social media and many of the usual suspects. I think one that you didn't touch on that I think is important that we dive into, it kind of goes into several things you already kind of, indirectly talked about. And that is that we have this amazing gift to be have access to so much information online, have conversations like this surrounding mental health. And with social media, it creates this mechanism of disconnection. And there's also all this information online. And I think people are looking to identify with something, especially if they're lost in life. They're looking for something to kind of join. And I think that becomes a problem with mental health, where you have people that are now identifying with having anxiety or depression, or just because they want to feel included and part of this movement. And now you're hearing so many people like self-diagnose themselves, or their favorite creator on TikTok is talking about something. I'm like, oh, that tracks a little bit. And I think it's a very slippery slope for people in regards to social media, and it like truly represents the double-edged sword of having amazing information while also having too much information. Like, what are your thoughts on all of that? Like, with desensitizing people to like true mental health conditions and the risks of people self-identifying and diagnosing themselves based on information they're seeing online.
Yeah, Doug, that's a great point. um, it's it's such a complicated problem, and I'm going to ask us to do something that doesn't usually happen on the internet, which is hold two ideas together at the same time. Like both of these things can be true. There's this approach um, in mental health called dialectical behavior therapy. And a lot of it is about dialectics, holding two things true at the same time, that something can both be good for you and bad for you. And here, I think the internet is both very good at bringing people together, and it's very bad at making people feel defined by that identity. So I'll give you a really quick example. We have problems in mental health now that have been discovered through online internet communities. Misophonia is a problem where people have a hatred of certain sounds. And this was not a thing we really knew about until people started to get together online and talk about it a little bit more. We used to think it like if people experience something like this, it might be super rare. And now we're starting to understand it's more common. And also now there's like neuroscience to back it up, that we have these brain scans that show that that emotional reactions are higher in people who have this. So this kind of all came out of the internet. That's good. It's bringing people together. We're understanding things better. You feel a connection to a community. The problem, though, is you are not your mental illness. Like this is one thing about you. Like I am someone. I'm a socially anxious person. Uh, that is there. That's not my defining characteristic. There's a lot more to me, and the danger I see this with a lot of young adults, but I also sometimes see this with like adults as well, is if you define yourself as I'm a socially anxious person, then you actually start acting like a socially anxious person, and you might start writing off certain things because I can't do that because I'm socially anxious. I can't do this because I'm I'm depressed. Yeah, this conversation has been going on a long time, I think, in the substance use community. Like, am I an addict? What does that mean? Right? Is this my identity? And I think for some people, yeah. For other people, no. Right? And that can be limiting. It can be too limiting. So the way we're, this is why I have so much tension with this. The way we're supposed to work is we're supposed to work in tribes and communities, small groups of people that we live close to, we interact with, we see often, and there's supposed to be diversity in those communities, diversities of strengths, of weaknesses, of talents, of struggles, of experiences, and we're supposed to help each other in that way. Now, the way most of us live, and this isn't because social media, this isn't because of smartphones, this has been going on for a while, is we're less connected with the group of people that we live near, but we're hyper connected with these people on the internet that we probably never see. Like I hope I see you in person one day. I don't know if I will, but here we are. I have more of a connection with you than I do the person I that lives behind me, right? So that's the wacky world we've created. Um, and if we were more connected with our local communities, our identities would be a little bit broader. They wouldn't be so narrow and rigid. But the way the world works right now is we're hyper connected to these other aspects of our identity. And that can create all these problems where people start defining themselves by this and start limiting themselves by this.
So, where do you kind of draw conclusions regarding what causes some of this stuff? You'll have some people say, at the root of anxiety and depression is trauma. You have other people that say at the root of anxiety and depression is the brain. At the root of trauma and anxiety is like environment. Like, what is your take on helping people understand where some of their mental limitations come from?
I feel like you're going to hate my answer to this.
Go for it.
And I say that because it's not a good soundbite. Um, it's all of the above, right? For some people, it's biology. We are straight up talking biology. There are people I've worked with who from from birth, well, maybe not from birth, but from like the first couple of years of life, it was very clear that this person is on the road to anxiety. There's something called behavioral inhibition to the unknown. So that basically means, to translate that, is there's some toddlers out there that are just scared of new situations. They're everyone is to some degree, but these are kids that are always they're pressing the brakes all the time whenever they're going to a new situation. And you'll see the opposite too. You'll see some kids, they see a tree and they just start climbing it. They've never been in that situation. They just go. These are people kind of become thrill seekers. There's same thing with depression. Yeah, there are some people who, from a very young age, have a pretty low mood. It's much easier for them to experience sadness. This is the way their temperament is. Temperament is just like, how easy is it for you to feel certain emotions? Some people, the volume's just turned up on anxiety, volumes turned up on depression, volumes turned up on anger. It's just genetics, runs in family, boom. And then there's other people, yeah, they go through traumatic stuff. Especially when you're young, if you experience trauma early on, it rewires your nervous system. It makes your emotions like quickly rise up because it's kind of a safety mechanism. It makes sense for you to be super alert, super on guard. Um, it, if you experience chronic trauma, like you've gone through an abusive family, you're gonna think you're a piece of crap. It becomes a part of your identity. So yeah, trauma can impact things, but there's a lot of stuff that is not traumatic and it did have a big influence on you. You know, a dog bit you as a kid. You watched the movie Jaws. You lived in an environment where you didn't really feel connected to other people. You were homeschooled. You never learned how to make new friends. There's so many reasons why. You know, you might have had a best friend who died early. There's so many life experiences that can warp all these things. So something I have learned a long time ago when I started practicing as a psychologist, I never make any assumptions. I talk to someone on the phone, have a 15-minute conversation. They say, you know, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I want your help. When I first started, I used to already form a story of who this person is. And then Doug, like a year of doing this work, I was like, oh my God, I'm always wrong. I am always wrong. Who the person I think is going to walk into my room is never the person that actually walks into my room. Um, and what I have learned is never make if someone says I'm struggling with this thing, never make assumptions about their story because I will always be wrong, and it's always a mixture of all this stuff. And for everyone, how much is it biology, how much of it is experience, how much of it is trauma, how much of it is the community they lived in, the time and place. That's a big one too, man. um like if you talk about masculinity and anger and men and fatherhood and all this stuff, it makes a big difference if you're someone that was born in the 60s, born in the 80s, born into the 2000s. Like culture and time and place, all this stuff makes a difference. So yeah, man, not a quick answer for you, not a very satisfying answer, but I hope one that actually honors the experience that people actually have.
I love the nuanced approach there, and I totally agree that there's not a one size that fits all with this stuff. I'm wondering, do you think there's a lot of information out there, and I guess and talk about like trying to help people understand like where their patterns come from, why they're depressed, why they're anxious. And I've heard people say that, you know, you should over index on where you're going in the moving forward and not so much on the the opposite? Like, where do you stand on that? I mean, do you think that people are wasting their time trying to figure out like where this stuff comes from, or should they focus on like what they can do to get better?
Man, it's a great question. Big picture, I think we spend a bit too much time trying to understand how we got from A to Z. Big picture, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's not like you can go back and change that stuff. Big picture. That being said, if you're someone who is living in the past, if you're someone who's like really ruminating, why did this happen to me? Why did I do that? Why was I in this situation? Then you might be dealing with more trauma kind of stuff. Because what happens with trauma is someone goes through an event, an experience, a series of events or experiences, or it's just kind of the baseline of their life. Like again, like abuse is a good example of that, where it's constantly happening, and there's supposed to be a normal healing process from that once you're in a more safe environment, or if you've witnessed something and you move on. There's a normal healing process where you take that really terrible thing that you went through or that you witnessed, and you kind of reevaluate your beliefs about yourself, about the world, about other people, and you find a way to put these things together. But in for people who struggle with those traumatic experiences, that normal healing process doesn't happen. So they're stuck. They're stuck living in that moment, or they're stuck questioning that moment, or they're just kind of frozen. For people like that, yeah, to we need to go back. We might need to reevaluate some of those memories. We might need to look at the impact of what some of those events have had. And some of that work you can actually do by yourself. You don't need to see a therapist. Some good journaling can do a lot of that. There's a psychologist, Pennybaker. He's done research on this, and he found that for a lot of these kind of things, if you just journal for 20 minutes a day for 3 days in a row about the difficult stuff you've been through, it's very helpful in helping you to move forward and healing some of this stuff, right? So for people that are living in these past moments and that normal healing hasn't occurred, we probably got to go back before we can move forward. The other place where I think it's helpful to talk about this past stuff is if you think you're alone in these struggles, because the reality is we're not. Like anxiety, depression, substance use, self-injury, suicidality, all of these different big ideas in mental health are far more common than people realize, but they're under discussed. And so people think they're alone. You're not. If you're experiencing this stuff, probably someone else in your family has. You probably have a relative who has experienced this stuff. If not you, there's someone around you who's experienced this stuff. So I think it's helpful to understand like where this stuff came from, cause and effect, because it'll make you feel less alone in your struggles. So I think it's important there too. Um, but it's in general, I think we focus way more on trying to understand that stuff, and we need to focus more on like, all right, well, what do I do now? How do I move forward? What can I do to get unstuck with all this stuff?
Yeah, you brought up a good word, unstuck, because I think a lot of people are stuck and they remain stuck for years and decades, even because they're so focused on the past. They think they're it's just the way they are. They're wired to be anxious. They're wired to feel a certain way, and there's no way out. What do you think keeps people like stuck and in this place where they're not getting better? Their anxiety isn't improving. Like outside of environmental circumstances, like generally speaking, like what keeps people from actually getting better?
We try to think our way out of our own problems. We try to think our way out of our worries. We try to think our way out of our depression, out of our substance use. We're so trained not to talk about these things. We so don't have opportunities to talk about these things. So we live in our head. We think that we're the only ones. Um, we keep ruminating about this stuff. We keep worrying about this stuff. And we think if we can just kind of like figure it out ourselves, we can get out of here. But man, Doug, that's not how we are built. We are not built that way. There are a ton of animals on this planet who are just have sheer power. You know, these are our lions, our predators. They got big teeth. They were dinosaurs, right? Like big, giant teeth. They can just kind of power their way through stuff. We are not them. You got other animals on this planet, very thick skin. These are your rhinos, right? These are your elephants. They can take a beating and just keep on going, right? That's not us either. We got very thin skin. So what do we do? What are Homo sapiens really good at? What are humans really good at? We're really, really good at being social, at being cooperative, at helping each other, at at believing in shared stories and using that to bring us together and accomplish stuff that we would never be able to do on our own. So what's the implication for that? The implication for that isn't just, you can't build a house by yourself. You can't really do anything worth doing by yourself. You need other people. It's not just about like the work that we do, but it's also about our mental health. It's also about our physical health. It's about our social health. The only way we can move through life is with each other, is by sharing our struggles, getting other people's help. It is by far the best thing we can do for ourselves when we're struggling, to get help from other people in the way we want to be helped. Doesn't mean you and I need to have a big hour-long talk about my feeling and how, the emotions that are coming up for me. No, it doesn't have to be that way. It can just be us hanging out. It can be us going to play basketball. It can be us doing something that just gets my mind off of stuff, or it could be, hey man, I'm really overwhelmed. I'm wondering if you can come over and help me out with XYZ. It can be like tangible help like that too, or it could be like talking about our feelings, right? But we we're so digitally connected, and we're so under emotionally connected, and we don't talk about this stuff. We try to do it ourselves, and it is the number one thing that will screw you up. It is a number one thing that'll keep you stuck, and is a number one thing that'll keep you rooted in the past and unable to move forward.
So, what is the path forward? Like, if somebody's watching this and they're starting to relate to our conversation and they're like, man, like, I'm lost. Like, I am anxious. I'm not feeling good. I want to find this path forward so that my life doesn't continue to repeat itself in the way it has. What are some good first steps, generally speaking, to help rebuild that connection with themselves, for people to rebuild connection with themselves and others? Like, where can people go from here?
So I think the first thing to do, the very first thing to do, is find language and stories that help you understand what you're going through. And so this can be through social media. Yeah, sure. It can also be through books and memoir and film, all that kind of stuff. Like whenever I find myself stuck in short form content, I'm trying to think like, all right, what's a long form equivalent of this? Like, I'm watching too many TikToks here. All right, what's a movie I can watch? Like actually sit down and just like have one screen that I'm watching for like an hour or two. Like find good stories about the things that you're going through, because you're not the only one who's gone through these things that you're going through, whether it is some like big setback in life, whether it is an addiction, whether it is like anxiety, depression, whatever it is, there's such good stuff out there. And what it does is, number one, it helps you realize you're not alone. But number two, it gives you metaphors and language that help you to describe the experience you're going through. It's super hard, Doug, to describe the struggles you're having. It is super hard. So I tell the story often about I live in Northern California, and when I first moved here, I went to, I mean, I grew up here and then I lived on the East Coast and then I came back. And when I came back, I met a neighbor over here at this kid's birthday party. And he was saying, "Oh, what do you do?" And I was saying, "Well, I'm a psychologist. My favorite thing to work on is social anxiety. It's something I experience a lot in my life, and it's something I love helping other people with." And he was like, "Social anxiety? Wow, what is that, man? I don't understand. What is that?" And I thought in my head, I'm like, man, I could have said agoraphobia. I could have said like anhedonia. I could have said all these like jargony words, but I said social anxiety. You'd think that would be super easy to understand what that means. It's anxiety about social situations. But for this person, they completely had no clue what I was talking about. And so what did I do? I gave a metaphor. I said, you know, like that big presentation you have to give at work, and how anxious and scared you are about it, and how you over prepare for it, and you're sweating beforehand, and afterwards you're thinking, did I do that right? Like, did it go well? And he was like, yeah, totally, I've been there. And I'm like, it's that, but going or down the street and talking to the person at the corner store. It's that when I have to think about returning an email. It's that when I'm going to a kid's birthday party like this and I don't know anyone. And he's like, "Oh man, that's got to be terrible. That sounds really difficult." And boom, we had that connection now. Like, now he got it. So you by looking at stories that really resonate with you, it's going to make you feel less alone, and it's going to give you something you can use to help talk about this experience with other people. And that's just step one. I think step two is about um, finding the tools that help you get out of your head. So that could be journaling. That could be finding a hobby, finding something that takes that attention away from the inside and puts it onto something else. A big idea I try to live by is by moving through based on what the universe is actually communicating to me, rather than what the internal universe inside of me is telling me. So I don't want to live by what's going on in my head. I want to live by what's actually happening in the world around me. So finding things that help you to do that. That's number two. And for some people, maybe that's like exercise and sports and running. For some people, that might be gardening. For some people, that's going to be, I got a buddy of mine, also a psychologist. He really got into like leather work. He makes leathers. He makes belts now for just for fun, and that's his thing now, that helps him get out of his head when there's just too much mess going on in there. And then the third thing is, you got to find a place to connect to people and talk about this stuff. I'm a big believer in support groups. I'm a big believer in group therapy. I know it's hard to find. I know it's hard to do reliably, but I think that's also one thing the internet can be really helpful with. Finding people where you can talk about this stuff, where you can learn from their journeys, where you can share these kind of things. There's a lot of pros and cons, but I think it's the most approachable, most affordable, best place for a lot of people to start working on their mental health.
And I think you brought up some amazing points. And one of the problems I think people face with taking, advice in general like this is that life happens. And so now they're working on like their current mental health state, or maybe stuff they haven't done well in the past. And then like situations come up at work or personally. And now they're like, oh no, like, what do I do? Or their environment is kind of chaotic, or something's going on in the world and they just don't know how to adapt. Like, how can people take this like more bigger picture a step further and be able to kind of manage this more effectively, like long term and on a day to day basis?
I think the first thing with that is to be kind to yourself. It's not linear. None of this stuff is linear. You're not gonna always keep getting better. So, I was someone who never struggled with falling asleep. It was just never an issue for me. And then the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden I developed insomnia. It was like go, go, go during the day. My daughter was like 3 years old. My wife and I were both working. My daughter was no longer able to go to any school. So now I'm teacher, I'm babysitter, I'm also trying to work, I'm doing all these things, right? The day was just go, 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 go. And then I'd try to go to sleep at night. And that's when all the worries and thoughts and stress just flooded my head. So now Dr. Ali was dealing with my own insomnia, and I had to figure out a way through it. And I had to try things that I never had to do before in my life. And that went away then. After like a year or two, I got better. And then I had a second kid and things were okay. But then, like starting last year, with all this election crud that was being thrown around, my insomnia came back. And the old stuff I was doing wasn't working anymore. And then I had to try new stuff. And now for me, it's about reading really boring fiction right before I go to sleep. That's what works for me. Never something I had to do before in my life, right? So be kind to yourself. We're not the same people we were 5, 10 years ago. We're not living in the same world that was around 5, 10 years ago. And things are going to keep changing. So it totally makes sense if stuff changes for you and it's not working as it used to. That's just being human, man. So be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, and then as much as you can, um, find things that are like pretty sustainable for you, things that you can like weave in to your schedule. Um, so a buddy of mine, my best friend actually, we had this conversation a year ago because I started to feel really jealous because he doesn't have any kids and he gets to do a lot more social stuff than I do. And I started to feel jealous that we weren't hanging out. And it came out in this like weird anger stuff with me and him. And he's like, dude, what's going on? And we had this whole conversation about it. And where we ended up in that conversation is, man, it seems like we just want to hang out more with each other and we're not doing that. Like somehow we can wake up one day and be like, wow, I haven't seen my best friend in like 8 months. Like, what happened? Right. So, what we agreed is like, we're just going to schedule this like once a month. We're just going to have this on our calendar that we're just going to hang out and we're going to go do something. And that's kind of the thing that we do now is once a month on Tuesday night. It's just in the books that we're just going to hang out, rain or shine. We're gonna get together, and that seems super sustainable to me. Like I can work around that. So you got to experiment, and you got to find something that's going to work and work for your schedule. People hear these ideas and then they think they got to do it all the time. They got to do it every day. And if they're not, they're like a failure. Like journaling is a good example. I think journaling is like the next best thing to therapy. If you can't get it, doesn't mean you have to do it every day, man. Just do it as you need to, right? Find something sustainable that works for you. And that's a problem I have with a lot of like hustle culture and productivity porn. All this stuff makes people feel like if they don't have these crazy wild systems that they're not a success, and so that's just so not true.
One of the solutions you're talking about to fix some of these problems we've been discussing over the last 40 minutes or so is this idea of connection and building real connection and not this fake connection that comes from interacting with people online. You brought up social anxiety. I would love to dive into that. I haven't really covered that, I don't think, on the show. And I think that when people think of someone who's socially anxious, it's a stereotypical person who's like maybe biting their nails, like afraid to like walk into the grocery store because they're in sheer panic. But I've understood and learned over the years that it's a silent battle, and there's a lot of people that struggle with it. You would just never know. Talk about what social anxiety actually looks like, and maybe some like hidden signs that someone's socially anxious.
A silent battle is such a great name for like a mental health memoir or a podcast or something, right? Like I feel like that could cover so much. But yeah, you're totally right. So I have met people who are socially anxious, who have a ton of friends, who are incredibly charismatic, who are handsome, beautiful, like objectively, you would see this person and you're like, I wanna be their friend. If not, I want to date them. Like like it's like clearly, um, you'd be like, these people are like socially anxious. Well, they would never be socially anxious. And then I've also met the people that you talk about, eye contact down. They're wearing hoodies. They want to hide. They're wallflowers. They don't want anyone to see me. I mean, that was my entire experience for the whole first half of my life. So let's dive into it, because I think the critical thing to understand here is social anxiety is normal. We are social animals, and once we hit puberty, the main fear we all have is being judged, rejected, and embarrassing ourselves in social situations. That is the number one anxiety that people have. Before that, it's separation anxiety, fear of the dark, fear of death and dying, all this kind of stuff. But like most of us kind of grow out of most of those things, but we never really grow out of social anxiety. It's there to keep us sharp, to keep us prepared, to make sure we don't make fools of ourselves. Like again, humans, tribal animals. So of course, social anxiety would be this glue that keeps us together. Social anxiety disorder is when your social anxiety, it's limiting you from living your life. It's getting in the way of the day-to-day social interactions you need to have. And what that can look like is either you spend a lot of time worrying about a social situation that's coming up, over rehearsing, over preparing for it, asking for reassurance from other people, or you go to those social situations and it's so difficult for you to be in it. It's so difficult for you to actually listen to what other people are saying, because you're so in your head. You're so judging yourself. Or one of the most common things, Doug, for social anxiety is something called mind reading. This is where people think they know how other people are seeing them. So, oh my gosh, everyone here must think I'm so stupid, or that he's so bored. Doug is so bored right now. He thinks I'm such a total loser, and he's thinking like, why did I even invite this guy onto my podcast? Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Or he cannot wait until this podcast is over so he can actually do something fun, because he's so bored out of his mind right now, right? That's mind reading, where you believe these things to be true. And that happens all the time with social anxiety. The bigger one so those things that I just talked about is distress. It's where you're so distressed before a social situation, you're so overwhelmed in it, you're lost in your thoughts during it, and then afterwards you might be replaying it over and over in your head. What I have found is most people who have social anxiety, they experience that, and because of that, they avoid. So they avoid a ton of social situations so that they don't experience that stuff. So it could be like not going to social events. Yeah, that can be avoidance. It could be trying to get out of social responsibilities, trying not to present that thing in class, trying not to present that thing at work. It could be that. But it's also not saying what's really on your mind, not expressing your opinions, playing it safe, coming across as someone who's super agreeable. My wife was recently on a work trip, and she was talking about someone she had to interact with, and she was saying, "Yeah, this guy, I would ask him like, what are his thoughts on this like this work that we have to do, and he wouldn't really tell me anything, and then whatever I said he just agreed with that. It was so annoying. And I'm like, sweetie, I think that person's socially anxious. Like, it's like he was so agreeable, and my wife started testing him. She would say one thing, and then later in the day she would totally change it, and then he just kept agreeing with her. And I'm like, sweetie, that sounds like he's a guy who's socially anxious. So avoidance can come in so many different ways. But for me, the way it is often experienced is when I was in a social situation where I was worried that people are looking at me, my heart would start to race, my armpits would start to sweat. In my head, this thought would come, don't say it, don't say it, don't say that thing. And then I would avoid. I would find a way to back off. I would find a way to try to hide. And so the dominant experience of social anxiety is that your body becomes super activated, your mind is racing, and you try to find a way to hide. And it's not just hiding from like the big social stuff, it's hiding from the small stuff. And people who live a life like this do feel less connected. They feel more exposed. And it's like going through social situations on hard mode. The difference between playing a video game on easy mode versus hard mode, more enemies, bigger battles, way, way more difficult to get through the exact same situation to the exact same level. That's what social anxiety disorder is like. And there's biology to back this up too, Doug. People who have social anxiety disorder, they see blank, ambiguous faces, which, by the way, is most faces. You walk through life, most people are not smiling and happy at you, and most people are also not frowning or like mad at you. Most people are neutral. And if you're someone who struggles with social anxiety, you see a neutral face, you see danger. You see a neutral face, you see threat. You see a neutral face, you see judgment. We've got a lot of research to back that up. We got a lot of good studies to back that up. So that's what happens with social anxiety.
And what do you think is the solution for this? You know, people who are listening to this or watching this and they're like, that's me. Like when I'm in social settings, I feel awkward or my heart races or I don't know what to say, or maybe I oversay things because I don't know what to say. Like, how can people like erase their social anxiety or just get better in a way that it's not impacting them and they can start to feel connected to other people again?
So I think there's what you just said is what everyone asks me in a very first appointment is like, how do I get rid of this? And then I say the very annoying thing of like, you don't. Right? Because social anxiety is that glue that keeps us together. We can't get rid of that. You get rid of that and you'll turn into an a-hole. Like if you don't care about how you come across, people don't like people like that. You know, you do need to care to some degree. We can talk about more about like, all right, well, what about these people that don't care? But I think that's a different topic. We need some level of social anxiety to make sure we shower, clean up, are presentable, are listening to other people. We're taking turns talking, right? So I can't get rid of that. The first thing I do want to get rid of, though, is your desire to get rid of it. I want to get rid of your anxiety about your social anxiety. For whatever reason, you're wired this way, right? You're wired this way right now. And maybe over time, the volume will turn down on your social anxiety. Maybe it won't. But we can change your relationship to social anxiety. That's the first thing we got to do. It's not your enemy. It's this really annoying friend. It's like that friend that shows up without asking, that friend that sticks around for too long, the friend that you're happy to host them for a couple of nights, but it's been a week. It's like, when are you going to leave, man? You know, it's that kind of friend. Someone who cares about you, got your best interests at heart, but is really, it's too much, right? So first off, think of your social anxiety in that way. So you're not fighting it. you need to know when it pops up. You need to know what it's like. And when it pops up, you're not trying to suppress it. The more you try to suppress anxiety, the stronger it becomes. It's really about changing your relationship with it. And when it appears, you're like, oh, that's my social anxiety. It's just, this is what it does. For me, it always pops up when I get a desire to ask a question in a professional situation. My social anxiety is there. It always pops up in that situation. Okay, it's my social anxiety. That's number one. Number two is super critical when that pops up. Find ways to get your attention away from inside in your body and into the real social situation. So just like I said before, the dominant thing about social anxiety is it increases your sense of danger and threat. You get lost in your mind. These people hate me. They think I'm dumb, boring, strange, ugly, stupid, unlovable, whatever it is. Like I can go through the whole list of stuff there. It's like my whole entire middle school years was just believing all that stuff. So you get lost in your own mind and you get lost in the physical symptoms. And it becomes so critical when you're socially anxious, not fight it, be like, okay, this is happening. How do I get plugged back into this conversation? How do I like see this through? And it takes practice. And sometimes people need to learn skills. They need to learn, like, how do I look at somebody in their face and not get overwhelmed by eye contact? Because eye contact is so overwhelming for socially anxious people. So it's like, all right, let's take a page out of the autism spectrum community. You don't have to look at them in the eyes. Look at their nose. Look at the bridge of their of their forehead. Look at this area right over here, or look just under their eyes, right? Or just have a little bit of eye contact, look away, come back. A little bit of eye contact, look away, come back. Maybe you got to learn how to have eye contact so it doesn't overwhelm you. Maybe you do need to learn how to start conversations. People who have social anxiety have avoided a lot of social situations. They haven't learned. How do you actually start a conversation with someone? How do you ask an open-ended question? You don't form friendships by saying, hey man, do you like playing golf? That's a terrible way to start a conversation. What if someone is like has never played golf in their life and they're like, no? All right, conversation's dead. That's very different than being like, hey, so what do you like to do for fun? Or what are you doing this weekend? Right? Boom, open-ended question, no yes or no answer to that opens up conversation, gives you so many places to flow, right? So maybe you got to learn a little bit of those social skills. You got to learn that like one of the things that you have in common with every single human being is you're in the same place and same time. So you can always use that in conversations. You can always be like, hey, so what brings you here? Or where are you off to? Doesn't matter if you're at a bus stop, if you're at work, you're in the same place and same time with someone else, and you can use that in a conversation. You can be on a Discord server. You guys are on the same Discord server. You have the same interests. Talk about that thing, right? So sometimes people need to learn some of those social skills because they haven't had the opportunity to practice them. And then the last thing is people with social anxiety, they gotta form a new relationship with awkwardness. Man, I hear this all the time that like awkward silences or starting conversations is so awkward, or we're talking, the vibe was good and then it got all awkward all of a sudden. Yeah, people are awkward. The social connection is awkward. My best friend, the guy I was just talking about before, he and I will have awkward moments, man. Yeah, it happens. The conversation dies. We've been friends since fourth grade. Gets awkward. That's just what it's like with people. It's the same thing with my wife. We have awkward moments where, if she asks me, hey, Ellie, did you do that thing that you said you were going to do? And I'm like, oh, nope. Gets awkward, right? So awkwardness is the price of living in a social community. It's just how it is. So with social anxiety, we're so afraid of awkwardness because we're afraid that it means rejection, it means embarrassment, it means you're going to get kicked out of the tribe. But awkwardness is not something to avoid because it can't be avoided. Awkwardness is something to work through. So if you're someone who struggles with social anxiety, you need to get more practice experiencing awkwardness and learning how to work through it. So sometimes with people with social anxiety, we have to do exercises where they intentionally bring on awkwardness. They might intentionally misspell something in a text message. They might go to the corner store down the street and pay with the wrong amount of money, or they might misorder the wrong thing and then correct the person and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made this mistake," right? Or you go to a crowded street and you drop your stuff on purpose to bring attention to yourself and get more practice with that feeling. Okay, this is what it feels like. I can work through this. Or maybe like totally evaluate your relationship with this stuff, like especially with dating and with dating anxiety. Rejection's a big part of it. Awkward first dates, a big part of it. It's just kind of the way it is. It's going to be like that, right? So changing your relationship with awkwardness, and instead of thinking that this is something that means I failed in a social situation, it actually means you're just moving through a social situation. And it's not something to avoid, but it's something to learn how to experience.
One of the other problems I think today is therapy, and I think maybe the way therapy is presented, and it really opened my eyes when I had Dr. K on the podcast, and he was talking about the difference between men in therapy and women in therapy, and how we should be handling things differently. And obviously, there's this huge mental health epidemic amongst men with suicide rates and feeling lost and hopeless and all the things. Like, what is your overall take on men's mental health and where therapy can fit into this equation?
I feel like we need 5 more hours. So, yeah, mental health, professional mental health treatment is really biased towards people who are very good at talking about their feelings. And men are not, in the United States, men are not trained, expected to be able to do that. We are culturally trained to push that stuff down. Also to kind of like push each other, and that a good man is someone who, um, I think a good man shows up and protects each other and also kind of teases and pushes other guys, and it's a way that they show love. And like all of these ways in which men are trained to be a good man, I don't think those ways really show up in mental health treatment. I think there's more conversation around it, and there's a lot of people like Dr. K who are really sensitive to this stuff, but I don't think it's the norm. And here's like, Doug, the thing I hate most about treatment, mental health treatment, the very first meeting. What is someone expected to do with most therapists in the very first meeting? You spend like an hour talking about the worst stuff you have been through in your life. Like, let's go through every trauma. Let's go through your biggest fears. Let's go through the biggest struggles you've had, the biggest setbacks, the biggest failures. Like, that is super overwhelming for not just like most men, but I think most people. That's a terrible place to start. And you compare that to like something like personal training. You sit down with a personal trainer and they'll ask you, all right, what's your goals? Why are you here? All right. So you want to get stronger, you want to look better, you're rehabilitating from an injury, you're training for a sport, like you're training for an event. What's your goal? All right, we got your goal. Step 2. All right, what's your baseline? I want to see what you can do right now. All right, I got your baseline. Step 3, here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to get you from here to there. What do you think? Let's do a starter course. Let's do 3 weeks of this, and we'll reevaluate. If we've got a good connection, we'll move forward like that, right? Like that is how most personal trainers work. And therapists are like the opposite. All right, let's talk about your deepest, darkest trauma. All right. Now, I'm not going to tell you much about how this works, but just come back next week. And I promise, like, this will work. It's this big mystery box, man. And it's this secretive thing that I don't think most people know. What does effective treatment look like? I don't think most people know you can ask your therapist, yo, how much experience do you have dealing with this problem? What is it going to look like to treat this problem? How do I know if we're making progress? What are you expecting out of me? How long is this going to go for? Like, those are all the kind of questions we would ask a personal trainer or a coach or a tutor. But they're not really questions we feel like we can ask a therapist. They're also like the kind of questions we would ask a medical healthcare provider, but they're not necessarily questions we feel like we can ask a psychological provider. So it's all this stuff. It's that we feel like it's this mystery machine. The examples we have in media are pretty terrible of what therapy looks like. I think therapy is really biased towards people who are very verbal, people who are good at talking about their feelings. It's like there's a lot of people out there, Doug, who we don't have the exact numbers on this, but there's a lot of people out there who just don't have an internal narrator, which means if they're not really talking with someone else, they don't really have a lot of thoughts that are popping up in their head. They just might have like images or feelings that kind of pop in and out of awareness, but they don't have this running narrator. Like a good friend of mine, we went to college together. I'm in my 40s. She's in her 40s. She just discovered a few years ago that other people have narrators in their head. And when she was reading books, she just thought that like when there's narrators, that this is some kind of like literary device. It's a way of telling stories, but like people don't actually have these narrators in their head. They don't actually have these thoughts that pop up in the head. And so she was constantly frustrated going into therapy because therapists would ask her to like track her thoughts and track her feelings. And she's like, nothing's really coming up. Right. And it's only a few years ago, she was reading a magazine and she discovered that like some people just don't have these internal narrators. So mental health is so biased towards people who are super aware of their thoughts, of their feelings, and are able to communicate that. And I think that leaves a lot of guys out there. It leaves a lot of other people out there too. And that's a big problem.
Yeah, so like the way that we're approaching this from a modern way, I think is lacking based on what you were saying. Like we need to find a different approach to handling certain things. And one of the things I think as a guy who's been in therapy, it's been tough, to relate. And that's why I think you're seeing the rise of people with using their learned experiences to help other people. Like, do you think that people that have learned experiences, as long as they're doing it in a way that, with integrity, they're doing it from the right place, do you think they can be more effective than just sitting in a qualified therapist's office who doesn't understand that person's perspective?
Yeah. What we need is like an all of the above approach. I think there's a role for people like me. And I also think I'm overkill in 99% of the situations. And I say that because I don't think what most people need is someone who's been in school forever and overly trained to deal with all this sort of stuff. And what I think most people need is someone who's going to show up regularly in their life, help the person to get out of their head, help them to like problem solve like the very next problem that they have. And And there are a tremendous amount of people that I think are living right below clinical threshold. What I mean by that is there's there's a lot of people who might not have social anxiety disorder, but they really struggle with social anxiety. There's a lot of people who might not have a substance use disorder, but the way they're using substances is getting them is causing a lot of conflict for them, right? There's a lot of people that sit right below that level. And someone like me is super overkill for that. And there's not enough people like me to go around in the world. So we need something else. We need a bunch of other approaches to help all the people who are struggling to get through, who probably don't need a professional, but they need something. And I think that can be a good friend. That can be a counselor. It can be a coach. It can be an influencer. I think it can be so many people. And when it comes to like the lived experience community, I feel like we work best when we're working together. Like I think the lived experience community pushes professionals forward. Like the best organizations I have gone to are those that have great involvement from the lived experience community and connect those with professionals. So OCF is the Obsessive Compulsive Disorder Foundation. So they help people with like things like OCD, and you go to that conference, and it brings together researchers, clinicians, and family members and individuals who are experiencing these problems. We're all like going through different stuff together. And those conversations are where the magic happens when you get everyone together. So I think there's I would be terrible at talking about this stuff if I didn't have my own lived experience, because I would talk about it with such jargon and detachment and disconnection. Um, and that's hopefully not what people feel when I'm talking about this stuff. Um, and also when I'm working on things that I don't have a lot of experience with myself, yeah, I got my professional knowledge, but I really rely on lived experience. I really do. Because the way people can communicate and share these things, it helps me to deeply understand this stuff. The only advice I have about that is for people to share stories about their scars, not their wounds. And what I mean by that is when you are sharing these difficult things that you've gone through, share the experiences that you've lived through, learned, and gained perspective on, not the active problems you're having like right now. Like if talking about the thing is so overwhelming that you can't sleep at night, that it like brings back all this sort of stuff, it's hard for you to live your life, then that's a wound. Don't talk about that right now. Give yourself time and space to work through it, to recover, to heal. And once it's something that you can talk about and it doesn't completely change the course of your day, then it's kind of become a scar. Then you can kind of work through it. That's the only feedback I give people. Um, but man, no, the lived experience community across all areas of mental health, that is one of the coolest things to see happen in the last 15 years, because that wasn't really as strong as it is now when I was going to grad school.
Yeah, because you see a lot of people kind of trash like life coaches and people that think they're qualified because they went through something, and I think there's a place for that because of the grifters that exist in the space. I also know that, for, a good part of my career, I've been the guy that people have come to when nothing else works. As in my career as a personal trainer and just going through what I've went through. I mean, I've had parents, some countless parents over the years, but we've tried everything with my son and nothing's worked. We love your story. Would you please talk to him? And, and I share that because I do think there is a place for people like myself with helping, in the mental health space. I do think you have to have strict boundaries. I think you have to understand when you need to refer out. You need to understand, what's right and what's wrong. You have to have the right intention. Like I've always had a network of people from a therapeutic community and medical community to refer out if I've ever, something was outside of my scope. But there is a space for it. I just think that, it's kind of like the theme of our conversation, right? It's like not this one size fits all approach to solving mental health issues. It's understanding what works for you and how can we do better. Because I think like for men, like there's a lot of men that are struggling right now, and talk about silent battle. Like that's it, right? It's a silent battle, and the suicide rates and the loneliness and feeling like they're not enough. Like so much that's going on. I just think we need to change the way we're handling things, and having a blended approach with this, with the medical community alongside fitness and movement being a massive component, community, lived experience, all those things that can kind of help us, course correct where we're at right now.
Yeah, no one person or profession or discipline owns mental health. Like that would be so stupid and egotistical and narcissistic and just completely blind to the problem for me to say that like no, only mental health experts, only psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists. Yeah, I can go on and on about all the professionals, but we're the only ones. Like, leave this to us. That would be so stupid because number one, there will never, if we could just snap our fingers and just double the workforce of mental health professionals, we still wouldn't have as many people available to meet the needs of the world. In Uganda, your chances, I think your chance of seeing a psychiatrist is 1 in a million. Like there is, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like there's 42 million people in Uganda and there's 42 psychiatrists. So it's literally 1 in a million is your chances. I think if I remember the data correctly. And so like the United States is better, right, than that. And in the UK has nationalized health care, but it's still hard to access medical professionals, and we have way more medical professionals in the United States, but like ability to access them and wait lists and costs. So no matter where you are in the world, there are massive barriers to care. So what do we do? A researcher who really inspires me is Dr. Vikram Patel, and he has this TED Talk like Mental Health for All by Involving All. And what he has done is taken ideas of public health, like what do you do in parts of the world where there's no healthcare system? Well, what you do is you find local leaders in communities and you train them in the basics of triaging, in the basics of childbirth, in the basics of like the everyday things that people need help with. And so he took that approach and he trained people in parts of India how to treat depression and how to treat substance use problems, and found massive success. It was cost effective. And when you train community leaders on how to do this, guess what? People are going to those community leaders anyways. And now they're equipped to deal with depression and substance use problems. Boom. Like, we need more of that. We need more community partnerships with experts so that we can scale up what we know already works. That's one of the cool things about the 20th century is we've learned a lot about what helps different mental health problems. What we need now is how do we get that stuff out there? And how do we get that stuff in the hands of people like you, who people are coming to all the time and being like, yo, Doug, can you help me out with this? Right? Like, there are a ton of people who will go to you and never come to me. Never come to me. I have friends that are so anxious to talk to me about stuff going on in their head. like very close friends. And I'm like, yo, Jamie, we've been friends for like ever. How come you never told me about like the anxious thoughts popping up in your head that are keeping you from falling asleep, you know? And he's like, well, I don't know. I don't know. Um, so we need all hands on deck, and we need community partnerships. That's how I think we solve this stuff.
Well, Dr. Mattu, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your wisdom. Thank you again. Like, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks for having me and for having these conversations. This is we need more of these, and I so appreciate the work that you're doing. Um, and I wish there were a million more people like you doing this stuff. It's We got a lot of work to do. We got to roll up our sleeves. We got a lot of stuff ahead of us, and I appreciate you for being part of the solution here.
Thanks for the kind words, man. And likewise, I appreciate all the work that you're doing as well.